Welcome, everybody. This is the I Know Nothing podcast. Today, we have on one of my best friends, Tim Wilson. Most people on here might not know them unless you're from Westchester and you worked alongside us when I was down there. But, Tim, can you explain to everybody who you are, what you do, and why someone should listen to you?
Cool. Well, much like you, I don't know anything, but I know a little bit about when it comes to nutrition. Known Matt. We've known each other since what, like 2008, something like that, right? Or a little later. Sorry, 2015-ish or so, maybe.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a performance nutrition coach. I mean, I do cover a lot when it comes to just general nutrition, right? I mean, I feel like I could work with anybody, but the specific population that I generally deal with is your high school, branching a little bit into middle school, but like basically your younger athletes, right? Um, I kind of enjoyed where that path went only because younger athletes have such a passion and there's such a drive to it. And if you know anything about training and performance, right, a lot of it's going to start with the individual, right? So their need and their desire, their want to do it is huge. And I find that that sort of comes much more organically with a younger athlete, right? And because they're driven, right? They want to accomplish a certain goal. They're super willing to learn. Their bodies are in a unique situation where there's a lot that can be done. Some of it easier than others, but again, it's really the younger athlete looking to improve performance, and that's where I jump in. So a lot of what I do ends up becoming a lot of it is education based, right? So a lot of it is going to start with the information that they have and what they know, and then trying to branch out. Some guys, girls come to me and know a lot of information, and it's just a matter of kind of getting them to break habits or create consistencies. And then others really kind of know nothing, or they get their information from poor sources, right? Not to joke, right? Because we're going to use this for social media, right? But there's a lot of stuff on social media that doesn't make sense, and even if it does make sense, it doesn't apply, right? So they'll get the theory behind it, and then they're like, oh, okay, I want to do this, and but it doesn't apply to them. So a lot of what I do in the beginning is really resetting a fundamental understanding of nutrition, what it is, how it works, what's what, and then how they can individualize it and apply it to themselves. So the way I kind of reference it is, so male or female, right? You go to a store, you can buy a suit, you can buy a dress, and try it on, it fits, it's good, right? That's like your basic nutrition. But eventually, you got to get that, you got to bring it to a tailor, they got to kind of custom fit it to you because, as you know, Matt, right? We've worked together. Some of the things I've told you that may work for you, they don't, right? You have your own individual preferences, right? So we kind of fine tune it and tweak it from there. Once we get past that fundamental phase, you're really just kind of monitoring and keeping them on track, right? Because everybody comes out of the gate hot, but it's just this long term, or you know, understanding where you are, what your timeline needs to look like, right? So, for example, you have a younger, let's say you have a 15-year-old male athlete, right? Their bodies are in a unique situation, so they could be eating and doing everything right, but they're not putting on weight at the same rate that they would, let's say, a year from now or 2 years from now when they're 17, 18, and you start to see these large hormonal shifts and changes that happen, right? So, I guess in a nutshell, basically what I do is I take the individual, figure out where they are, where they want to go, put all the pieces together, and then we create this comprehensive plan and strategy towards eating more and getting to where they want to be. So for the most part, most of my athletes are looking to gain weight. And then we have to do some tweaking, right? If there's a little bit of overweight issues going on there, that's fine. But it's usually a balance of, like, when we say building weight, like learning how to build muscle, right? Like you and I have always had these conversations, right? The bigger you are, the more muscle you're carrying, more likely the better your performance is going to be, and the more freedoms you're going to have when it comes to your food, right? So that's kind of a overarching synopsis of what it is that I do with a younger athlete.
Yeah, I think it was perfect. I think a lot of people that are going to listen to this are going to be parents, and that's who. I always tell you this. I think nutrition is way harder than what I have to do. The kids actually physically have to come to me and work out for the most part, right? You aren't in the kitchen with your athletes. And, you know, one of the main reasons that I wanted to have you on was I get more nutrition questions than I do working out questions, which is hilarious to me. But I was at a high school for the last 3 years, and I actually started running just like some questionnaires. We did some surveys, and it was pretty scary how much the kids were not eating, which I know you know, but what their parents were sending them to school with or without. And some of our kids didn't have a lunch. And it was getting super frustrating because nobody wanted to listen, but everybody wanted to come and get big and strong. And I'm like, you understand that? I mean, let's just call it what it is. Most of the high school athletes are average athletes, right? They're not going to play pro sports, is what I mean. But they're asking to be better than their genetics are going to be predisposing them to, and they don't eat right. So that's my little spiel of like why I wanted you to be on, because I'm probably going to send this link directly to parents and coaches because they need to hear it. I think it's a low-hanging fruit that most athletes I deal with are missing. So
So,
I wanted to start one of my big questions. I'm genuinely curious of,
well,
you've
if you
been
can,
doing
let me
this.
jump in because you
Go
did say
ahead.
something pretty like really interesting. There's a few things you said. So number one, if the message is directed at the parents, that's obviously the most important thing, right? Because yes, a lot of these kids, they'll take ownership, they'll want to do it, they'll say it, but it also, they're not going to do it themselves, right? They may make the attempt, but let's say, hey, if the grocery store's close, they can go, they'll be willing to do it, right? The parents are going to be super involved. One big thing that I always notice, right? Because you asked me before, like, it's giving me an idea of like trends that I see. A trend that I see is parents, obviously you and I will listen, we're both parents, right? We got young kids, we know we'll do whatever we can for our kids. So some of it is just either a lack of understanding or they're trying to do their best, so the intentions are there. But one issue that I see is parents tend to feed their kids the way they think that they're supposed to eat, meaning as the parent, right? So you take what's the average parent that we're dealing with here, right? 45 to 55, let's say, plus or minus, right?
Yeah.
So, based on their lifestyle habits, they may be on statins or they're worried about carbs, they're worried about sugar, they're worried about red meat, they're worried about saturated fats. So, without having a real clear understanding of the context, right, for them, sure, they might need to reduce their carbohydrate intake. They work in an office, they sit down all day, fine. Carb intake does not need to be high. Their red meat intake might need to be a little bit lower because we are dealing with some cholesterol issues. Fine. You start feeding your child like that, right? Let's say a young, now we're going to say these rules apply to both male and female athletes. Let's just use a male athlete, for example. You have a 14-year-old male athlete that doesn't eat a ton of saturated fats. And then hey, why is little Johnny so skinny and scrawny? And why is this guy massive, right? Yes, there are genetic differences. There's no doubt about that, right? But if you're not going to give your kid, let's say, red meat or any food that has saturated fats, which is a precursor to building testosterone, how can you expect your child to have large amounts of muscle or have the strength and the power in order to do so, right? So for parents, it's really, that's again where I target as well. I work with the athlete, but then I also have to work with the parents because they're really they're the resource, right? They're the ones that are going to be going and getting the food and helping them plan, right? Now, anything that I do, right? You're saying like, oh, I'm shocked to see what parents send their kids to school with. Listen, we get it. Making school lunches early in the morning, it could be a little bit pain in the ass. Your kids are a picky eater. That's fine. We get it, right? You have to just think of it as like a balance. You never want to eliminate food. Some days, listen, you want to throw mac and cheese and chicken nuggets in the lunchbox, fine, go to school, have a good day, right? But you can do that here and there, but you have to zoom out and look like, is that what they eat every single day? Or is that like here and there and you kind of space it in there? Because you want the kids to be kids, but you want to let them see and feel what the difference is when they start eating a certain way, right? And trying to expand a palate, then that kind of leads them to grow and then want these foods on their own, right? So just to kind of tie in that point, parents, the more they understand what the needs of their child are, then they can kind of work on strategies. And the other thing too, just regarding the parents, if they're not doing it, 99% of the time the kid's not doing it, right? Like, you and I always joke, like with my daughter Parker, right? Like I feed her the way that I eat, and I talk to her about building muscle, and I do that. If I only ate, chicken cutlets and pizza, but then I'm like, no, you have to eat this and this, they're gonna say, what are you talking about? No way, right? Like apple trees don't grow oranges, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? So just wanted to kind of cover that point just regarding the parents and the approach that they're taking. Their kids' needs are completely different from theirs.
It's such a great point, and they need to hear it. But at the same time too, I got to work with a lot of directly relate, like working with coaches at the school. So they're asking me like, hey, what warm up should we do? What stretches should we do? I'm like, hold on, why don't we make a focus on nutrition and sleep? Because they're not doing the stretches I ask anyways. If I'm not present, they're probably doing it half-assed. So they're missing that piece. And my question to you is, without going off, like, because we need to keep this kind of surface level so people can start to either reach out to you or people like you to find a nutrition coach, but they don't know where to begin. And my question to start this convo is, what are the big things that you're seeing that are issues with athletes, what they're currently eating at the high school level?
If I could pick one thing that could completely dictate, they don't even need to ever call or see or me again. They could take this one bit of information, and I can pretty much guarantee you that it will make some change. It's going to get you only so far, but it will definitely make a change. Is food quality all day long? That's all I'd have to say. Most athletes, or most people in general, are not, the majority of their diet does not come from real food. Now everybody's like, oh, that sounds so simple, right? It's like, well, then do it. Look at it. See what people actually eat. See what people buy in the grocery stores. See what they're putting into their bodies, all of it. It's not actually real food. And if it is real food, it's been so processed and manipulated where the quality has been brought down so far, right? That it's still doing basically the same thing. You might as well be eating, garbage in and of itself anyway, right? So food quality, meaning like most people, they understand, okay, like what protein is, but they're not really sure of like what the quality of protein is, right? Because they'll say like, oh, this has protein in it, right? They'll say like, for example, like peanut butter, right? Like, oh, I eat peanut butter. Peanut butter's got a ton of protein, yet they don't realize that peanut butter's, yes, it has protein in it, but it's an incomplete protein. So your body actually isn't going to use that and build muscle. We need to focus more on animal proteins, right? But even just like I said, like the quality of the food, if you look at it, it's a lot of breads, it's processed grains. There's a ton of soy in our diets. There's a ton of sugar in our diets, right? People are scared to eat like real food. Look at like, take people, let's say, along the coasts, and then look at people in like middle America. Middle America generally has a lot of what? They have a lot of farms. So people generally are more self-sufficient, and they're eating what? They eat animals and plants and vegetables, right? I always say if it runs, swims, or flies, or if it grew in the ground, it's real food. That's what you should be eating, as close to that source as possible. So what I see, and where I see the big struggle come in, is that guys know they need to gain weight. Girls know they want to put on some muscle. And that's always a little bit more of a delicate balance with females. But for the most part, your higher, performance female athletes know they, and they want to build muscle, and they're not really overly concerned with weight, but they think, okay, I got to get calories in. Fine. So we're driving in calories, but then you start to look, it's like, oh, I had, and I'm a fan of them, right? But like for breakfast, oh, I have these protein waffles instead of like that protein waffle alongside of eggs, alongside of fruit, and maybe some, bacon if they wanted just for a little bit of extra, right? But a lot of it is just like poor quality, highly hyper processed food that provides them a ton of calories, doesn't really give them a ton of satiety. So they're eating a lot more, and they're like, wow, I'm eating. I mean, how many times have I seen guys, oh, I eat 5,000 calories? And I actually look, and they're pretty damn close to 5,000 calories. And then they say, well, they haven't gained a single pound, right? So again, if I could tie it back to food quality, reason why they don't gain weight, sorry, let me jump back, is it's basically like me giving you a random bucket filled with Legos, right? The Legos are the calories. I give you this random bucket of Legos, but you really can't build anything with it. It's just a bunch of pieces that don't mean anything. You need a specific set with pieces in order to build what it is that you're looking for, right? So food quality, I think, is one of the biggest driving factors. Problem with food quality is, one, it's way more expensive, right? Unfortunately, which that could be a whole separate podcast if we wanted to, as far as our feelings on that. But also, two, it's convenience, right? Like, it's a pain in the ass to wake up and make your kids lunch and make them real food. It's, it's easier just to grab like a box of this, put this in there, rip open the package, throw this random shit in a lunchbox and send them off to school. Like I said, you can do that here and there, but you can't do it every day. Like, it takes time and effort in order to do that. Much like training, right? You can't just, go in and half-ass it in the gym. You got to push yourself. You got to put the work in, and you got to do it.
Yeah. And, the thing that I'm going to get to this question about the reality of being in a school and eating properly, but just to like tell you and parents what I'm actually seeing. And I don't mean this as disrespect. I have young kids now, and yes, I was feeding Lucy ground beef and avocado from the get-go. But if you walk into our house, once in a while she's having ice cream. You know what I mean? We allow those things to happen. But I'm watching 16 and 17-year-old kids who tell me they want to play at the next level. They are concerned about performance, and their parent packed them white bread and one turkey cold cut on it. And I asked what they had for breakfast, and it was half of a blueberry muffin. And I'm looking at them going, okay, you know what? Yes, I know it's tough as parents, but kids, when you're 16 to 17, if you're putting all the time and effort in, you can make a better choice in that. And I've tried to give my own recommendations on, hey, go to the store with your parents. I've made like a food map of where to shop, things to look for. I've given options of, hey, this is a good quality thing that you can bring and you don't need to microwave it. I've taught them how to meal prep properly, but nobody actually wants to listen to me. It's just like when I give coaches recommendations on, hey, don't run your team into the ground because they're going to be fatigued for the game. And they run their team into the ground and they have no energy in the fourth quarter or whatever. Right. So my next question to you would be, okay, the 10 months out of the year that the kids are in school, what are some things just like on the surface that you're recommending that they can eat and pack? Because that is a huge question. Parents are like, what can I bring? They can't microwave their food. I'm like, okay. And I saw at the high school, it was very difficult. They literally weren't allowed to go microwave their food, which again, maybe some schools are different, but at my school that I was at, they couldn't. So I leave you with that. Like during the school day, because it's a mega question I get from kids and parents is what are you recommending that they can bring that can, stay in their lunchbox all day?
Sure. So first of all, we understand this. 9 out of 10 times, your school lunch is going to suck, right? Like I've probably seen maybe over the past 2 years, I've seen a couple schools that are at least by us where I'm like, holy shit, man, like that school's got like, I want to go eat there, right? Like the food quality is good. Now they're most likely going to be a private school, right? Because they have more resources in order to do something like that, right? So that's not necessarily going to apply. For the most part, I already take into consideration that this kid is going to have a difficult time eating at school because school lunch is going to suck, right? If we get lucky, great. If not, we're dealing with what we expected anyway. So the first strategy I explain to kids is you bookend your days, meaning you have to basically assume that you're going to eat very little or not enough of the right stuff in the middle of your day. So you kind of work on your bookend, right? I'll try to do it backwards so people watching it, right? So you got to think like, okay, so what's the first meal that you have the most control over is breakfast. And I love when people say, oh, I don't have time in the morning because Matt, you and I have talked about this a million times. Anybody that says they don't have time to eat breakfast is completely full of shit. You're not prioritizing it because the reality is to get up and make something shouldn't really take you any more than 10 minutes, right? So you should be able to get up. It just means that you're not waking up in time to do it, which means it's not enough of a priority for you to do so, right? Because everybody thinks that extra 5 minutes hitting the snooze button is going to do it, right? I mean, that's an age-old argument. We don't need to, bore people with that, right? But I say bookend your day. So if you know, okay, school lunch is going to be tough, even if I bring it, whatever, we'll get into that in a second. School lunch is going to be tough. Let me bookend my day. So in the morning, start off and have a knockout breakfast, right? And that might have to be one of the bigger meals of the day. You do get into some challenges because people aren't often super hungry in the morning, and that's fine, but you can change those patterns because if you're not really that hungry in the morning, I would say, okay, well, let's at least start with like a couple scoops of protein, a piece of fruit, and maybe like a whole grain waffle or one of those Kodiak cake waffles. Again, not the best quality, but again, it's part of a system. It's not the only thing they're eating. It's just part of the actual meal. Eat more than what you would normally want to eat. So then at least you've locked in those calories. That portion is done. During the day, you got to see. A lot of times I've heard, to be honest with you, where they say school lunches do suck, and I know I do feel like they do as well. But a lot of it has to do with they don't even really know what they're looking for. So does it bad, or is it just that you don't really want that and you're not in the mood for it? So you're like, I don't want that. I want this, because a lot of them might have grilled chicken options or potato options or rices or things like that, right? Again, they could still have bad choices. That's fine. But what I would do is at least like I try to get the school lunch calendar and see like, okay, what are they offering? What do they do? Hey, some days are better than others, whatever. But if you do bring something, to your point, right? Like, what's something easy to bring? Okay, let's go with a sandwich. The sandwich that you just explained to me sounds pretty terrible. I mean, I wouldn't even want to eat that even if I wasn't focused on nutrition. It just doesn't sound sufficient or good enough anyway, right? But what if you take that same sandwich, instead of it being white bread, what if you get like a nice sourdough roll, Portuguese roll, where the bread's got some crunch, it's got some substance, it actually tastes good, right? Can you do, if you want to do a cold cut, fine, but like, are you doing boar's head turkey? Okay, just maybe we got to put a little bit more on it. I'm not condoning eating cold cuts, but it's certainly better than one piece or eating something that you're getting from the school, right? And even too, this is where people often I kind of catch their attention, right? I would say, go with a chicken cutlet. And they're like, a fried chicken cutlet? And I'm like, yeah, a fried chicken cutlet. Like, well, that's unhealthy. And I'm like, Well, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and argue that it's good, but it's certainly better than one piece of boar's head turkey, right? And then what else can you put on it? Throw some veggies on that, right? Throw some kind of sauce or vinegar. Make that sandwich much more, have more substance and make it more lively instead of just like taking stuff, slapping it together, wrapping it up, and shipping them off, right? Then you can start looking at your snack choices that you bring alongside of that, right? Can we throw in some nuts? Can we get in some veggies with like a hummus dip or something like that? Some yogurt, some hard boiled eggs, whatever it is. I mean, again, it all depends on the individual's preference. But you can make a lunch that's relatively easy to pack and make. Not going to be the best quality, but again, is it at least when we say quality, don't look at it as like it has to be the best, most healthy meal. Just look at it on like a sliding scale. Like if this is garbage and this is the best, are you closer to this one or are you closer to that one? Right. Then where this is usually a challenge is kind of the kids' schedule after school. So, like, what time does school end? What time do they have to start their training? So that window of what they could eat might be a little bit limited, right? And then, so you sometimes you got to kind of play around with that. Usually, if you're unsure, your best sort of pre-workout meal for a kid that doesn't have a lot of time to eat is going to be something like any kind of fruit or dried fruit, just to get some quick carbs in, get the blood sugar up, get them ready to come in and train, right? Hydration and sodium intake, separate topic, but not really separate, but not what we're talking about here. But that stuff can also be leveraged a little bit. Then they at least get them something so that their training is effective, right? Because great, we've gotten there, we're training all day or every single day, but we're not getting the most out of it, right? So at least if we book in the day, we got a good breakfast. Lunch can be sort of to get us through. Then we have something before, then you backload the calories throughout the course of the day. I'm not saying backload everything in its entirety. Like you don't want to go all day and then eat all of the calories at the end of the day. But if you have to just make up like 30-40% of the calories from a post-workout shake and then a larger dinner, you've kind of just, instead of having the waves be like this, you've kind of, you just slowed them down a little bit. And then you can from there assess eating patterns. Okay, what could we improve with lunch? And can I actually eat a little bit more? Or you know what, today I can bring something. Other thing too is, you say like, oh, it's hard, they can't microwave food. My kids bring hot food every single day to school. How do I do it? It's really quite simple. They sell thermoses. They've been around since probably before you and I were born. Now, right now, they come in different colors and they come with spoons, whatever. You can literally heat up ground beef, rice, chicken, potatoes, whatever, put in a thermos. It's hot until 6 o'clock at night. So the idea that you need to do something and you can't get hot, like good food, you're not looking through the right lens. You're just trying to make an excuse. Oh, it's too hard, so I'll do nothing at all. Instead of saying, well, what could I do? Right. So that's kind of my approach to answer the question is at least bookend the days, but like invest in something that you can take actual food. If you're bringing your food all day long, you will make a huge improvement just by simply bringing your own food and not relying on having to get it from school or not eating at all.
There's a lot of good things there that I'm going to be sharing with everybody. But again, I'm only going back to this experience because I didn't have this at Athletes Warehouse. I haven't had it yet where I was in the school day. And the amount of fatigue and just like unwillingness to want to do anything. I was in a PE class where I ran the weight room. Okay. So every day, the majority of the kids are not eating breakfast. Some of them didn't eat lunch. They feel horrible. And then I was there after school. Now, in most cases, they're either going to practice or if the school has a strength coach, they go to a lift, right? Now they haven't eaten food until practice or lift. They go to practice or lift. And I have no data to make this statement, but I have to imagine a lot of the issues and injuries I was seeing is because kids were, honestly, they were underfed. They were not eating and they were tired. They were already mad because they had to go to practice. I don't know why people play their sport if they don't want to play it. But my thing is, my question to you is have you seen this issue where you're seeing kids who are not eating properly have an increase in injury or not? And have you seen with athletes that you work with, like when their nutrition got better, obviously all habits get better, but like, have you seen a decrease in injury?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, listen, injuries are going to happen regardless if you're, properly fueled and fed and all of that, right? We know that. But some of the examples or reasons why there's a little bit of an uptick is if you're hungry, you're not going to have a ton of energy. If you're not having a ton of energy, is your focus going to be there? Are you going to be aware of the situation and where you are and what's going on? Are you going to kind of just be like moseying along and then you're not really kind of like focused or doing your movements and everything that you're doing is not really done with intent. Why? Well, because the brain lacks glucose, doesn't have sugar. Things are, your concentration, your focus is going to be a little bit lower. You're not going to have the same power. And you're just kind of like existing there versus being warmed up, primed, adequately hydrated, adequately fueled to where you're just awareness, is more there. Plus, two, if they're doing it one day, maybe not a huge deal, but chances are, like you're saying, these athletes are doing this day in and day out. And it's not like they're magically going home and eating beautifully and doing everything and recovering, right? So now you're talking about how far can we go back? Is it days? Is it weeks? Is it months of just under eating and lack of energy, then their lack of recovery? So it's you're just chipping away, and eventually that's just gonna like it's just gonna erode. Like it's kind of like when the beach, washes up on the shore. Oh wow, the sand moved or whatever. But over years and years and years, all of a sudden there's not enough. It's not strong. The whole cliff collapses down, right? So that's the two areas that I would kind of see. So one is it's just in the moment where they're just not fueled and they're just lazy and not focused, so they're more likely to get hurt because they're not doing it with intent. And then following that, the risk of injury is increased because they're just not fueled and adequately recovered. So let's say they've done, they did deadlifts with you the day before and they don't actually adequately recover from that. Now they got to go use some kind of a similar muscle. It's stiff, it's tight, something pulls, something pops, they get hurt. And it's like, well, you weren't adequately recovered. You had no business lifting and training and doing what you were doing that day anyway, because you're not eating, right? It's like expecting a car to run, but you're never going to stop at the gas station. Like you can't be surprised when the car turns off and doesn't start, right? So, but as far as like, decreases in injury, I would say, there's just, it's hard to say that, there's been a decrease in injury because they can just happen. I mean, I've had some of the guys that do everything perfectly and they still get hurt. There's a number of factors, but yes, it makes sense to anybody that if you're adequately fueled and adequately hydrated and, and you're recovering properly, the risk of injury is definitely going to be decreased.
I hate to say it, but we're already less than 7 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm going to skip some of these, but this is just a big question. And I know you can go off on a tangent. So I'm going to give you a 2-minute cap. Okay.
Okay.
If everybody who's listening to this right now is not understanding, you're making a main message. You need to eat food and hopefully a better quality food, right?
Yeah.
Right. For the last 3 years at the high school level, I have parents, coaches, and kids asking me, what supplements should I be taking? And my obvious response is, you are literally not even eating 1,000 calories a day. Do you and I both believe in supplements? Obviously. But I would like to know, I'll give you a 2-minute rant piece on like high school athletes specifically and supplements. Go.
Okay. So I can tie that in, but I can also kind of tie into like another couple minute cap anyway, right?
Okay.
So first of all, kind of tying into along the things that, you and I were just talking about or anything from this podcast, if it's you have to like talking about wanting to do something and actually wanting to do something are very, very different things, right? So first and foremost is kind of like an individual needs to look at themselves and see like, do I actually want to play at the next level and what does it take in order for me to get there? And if that's the case and they truly mean that, on their own they will do it with nutrition. I've gotten away from, and I actually, I never thought I would be in this position, but I do at times say, I don't know if your son or daughter is a good fit for me, because to try to, you can't force them to do anything, right? The ones that say, oh, I want to do it, you'll know right away if they're going to do it or not, because you ask them to log their foods, you ask them to do this stuff, it's there. So if their point is like, if you're serious, we'll see it and we'll know. So you have to be serious, you have to be ready. It's going to be hard, it's going to be a challenge, it's going to be a pain in the ass, it's going to suck on some days. Yes, but that's fine. But if you're that serious, you will do it, right? So once you get them past that, and now the need is there, they want to do this, they want to move forward with it. There's 5 things people need to understand when it comes to nutrition, right? And it goes in this order. We have calorie balance, so you need to understand how many calories you need to be bringing in on a daily basis, plus or minus, depending on what the goal is, right? Gain weight, lose weight, maintain, whatever. From there, they should have a basic understanding of where these foods are coming from, their macronutrients. What's enough protein for little Johnny? How many carbs does he need? And how many grams of fat does he need? And they should be able to log their food and then recount what they're doing, right? Like to what you said before. It's cool when they go and see you, you're watching them. I have to let them go home and do all this stuff. I'm not following them around. So they need to know that they're actually eating enough. So they have to record that, and they should be able to look back and say, okay, I am actually eating enough of the right foods. Third step, kind of like the peak of it, is going to be your food quality, right? Followed by meal timing and then supplements. So to kind of tie it in and answer your question, if they can't express to me or explain to me what they're doing for the previous 4 steps, you can buy all the supplements you want. It's not going to do a goddamn thing, right? So you have to understand that's the system in and of itself. And once you take that and you start putting that together, and it's not all going to come at once, it takes some time to build it there, right? But you have to do all of those before supplements. I would say some of my top guys, do you think they're going to be taking all of these random, crazy different supplements? They're probably taking like 2 or 3 supplements, a protein, a carbohydrate, and a creatine, right? The rest of it is coming from food, adequate rest, adequate recovery, getting in enough sodium, getting in enough fluids, getting in enough calories. They're getting it all from actual food. They don't have to waste their money on supplements. There's no need for them, right? If there's a need, you do it. The name is a supplement. It supplements something that's already in place. If you don't have the first thing in place, don't waste your time, don't waste your money. So the big takeaway, I think, for people, that at least my approach and what I try to do is I try to take a really complex topic and narrow it down in the beginning and then grow from there, right? Because everybody wants to do this. They get these really elaborate plans that they can't follow. Yet there's been times when I've had guys make one small change and just start with doing that and then let them sort of organically grow into it, because if they see it and feel it, they'll want to know the next step and then the next step and the next step. If you just slap them with a huge plan, they can't follow it. It's just a really expensive piece of paper, right? So what I feel that I'm good at is like I try to tailor it and tweak it. So even if it's just small changes that aren't going to have a huge impact, it's just getting their foot in the door, right? Getting them exposed to it to start making change and then letting it grow from there. So again, that's kind of where I tie in, is like you don't go from A to Z. You got to kind of follow the steps in between and see what an individual needs and then work with them like that. But at the end of the day, they take one thing away from this call: start eating more and start eating more real food, like shit that you can't leave out on the counter for too long or it's going to go bad. If you do just that and drink water and sleep, you'll probably start to notice an improvement. I'd be willing to bet it.
I think you just answered my last question, was piece of advice for athletes. We have less than 90 seconds. So because I really think people might reach out to you, without giving out your cell phone and stuff. What's the best way for people to reach you?
Well, anybody that you're working with, if you know them directly, obviously, we're not going to post it, but you can share my number with them directly, or they can find me. You can obviously tag it here. You'll have that.
Yeah.
They can just, shoot me a message on Instagram, and we'll just find a way to get in touch, and then we'll start talking.
I'll put the handle in there, but what is the handle? Because I want people to go look at all the education. I mean, I use your Instagram when I'm educating my athletes, but what's the handle?
It's Coach_Tim_APN.
Okay, good. I hope people reach out. I think you dropped a lot of knowledge. Obviously, you and I could have went way longer, but I want to cut it before we go. But maybe if we get some hits off of this, maybe you and I can do one once in a while and provide some info, because we deal with the same population and it's the same thing. Nutrition and training need to go hand in hand. And I think, you and I got to work together a long time ago on this. It'd be cool that people reach out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love it.
All right, brother. Well, before this thing ends, appreciate you coming on. Everybody, thanks for listening. Hopefully you got some good nuggets out of this.
Yeah. Talk soon, brother.
All right. Later.
Later.